Thank you, Javier, and thank you, Wild Detectives, for hosting this really wonderful panel tonight. I just wanted to thank you all so much for braving this crazy weather tonight to join us for an elder care discussion and conversation. It is a testament to how challenging this journey can be that you've all come out tonight to seek support and guidance in elder care. As a culture, we in the U.S. are not prepared to handle the upcoming wave of baby boomers becoming seniors and the current seniors living into their 80s, 90s, and beyond. We all have parents, yet elder care falls into our lap like an elephant jumping off a third-story balcony. It's not pretty, it's not easy to deal with, and it's certainly hard to ignore. We need to start a national conversation on planning ahead, on supporting one another, and on sharing resources available to lift that elephant out of our laps and onto the ground next to us. So tonight we're going to start a conversation, and we're happy you've come to be a part of it. So let's get started. I'm going to ask a question or two of each of our panelists, and then we'll open it up to your questions from the audience. But first, let me introduce you to our amazing panel of elder care experts. Virginia Hammerle writes a weekly column in the Dallas Morning News on issues facing seniors and their families. She founded Hammerle Finley Law Firm in 1984. She's board certified in civil trial law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, a fellow of the Texas Bar Foundation, and has been voted a super lawyer in business litigation each year from 2012 to 2017. Mrs. Hammerle's practice includes estate planning, probate, guardianship, business law, and litigation. She received her Doctor of Jurisprudence in May of 1982 from Southern Methodist University School of Law, and an undergraduate degree in finance in May of 1979 from the University of Missouri-Columbia. Mrs. Hammerle is an accredited estate planner through the National Association of Estate Planners and Counsels, and a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, Wealth Council, and the Texas Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. She is certified as an ad litem from the Texas Supreme Court, and she's also a member of the Denton County Bar Association, as well as Denton County Real Estate, Probate, and Trust Section. Please welcome Virginia Hammerle. Dr. Jill Studley received her bachelor's degree in biochemistry from Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, and her medical degree from Loma Linda University in Loma Linda, California. She completed her internal medicine residency at Tufts University in Springfield, Massachusetts, where she also served as assistant chief resident and completed a fellowship in geriatrics. Dr. Studley is board certified in internal medicine, geriatric medicine, and hospice and palliative medicine. She joined Highland Springs Health Center in March of 2017, and prior to joining Highland Springs, she served as the medical director of the Baylor Elder House Calls program for over 12 years, as well as serving on the Health Texas Provider Network Board of Directors and Baylor Scott and White Quality Alliance Board of Managers. Dr. Studley is a multi-year D Magazine top doc. Please help me welcome Dr. Jill Studley. Nadine Roberts Cornish founded the Caregiver's Guardian, LLC, in 2009. She has an extensive background in public health, education, and served as an independent consultant for 15 years in the state of California's Department of Health Services, where she provided expertise on some of the state's most innovative social marketing campaigns. Nadine's most important role, however, was her 15-year caregiver role for her own mother. That journey was so complete that when it ended, Nadine didn't think she would ever have to utter the word caregiver again. After her mother's death, though, Nadine knew without a doubt that caregiving, consulting, education, and coaching would be her life's work. For the past 8 years, she has care managed, consulted, with and supported caregivers across the country. Those experiences were the catalyst for her inaugural book, Tears in My Gumbo, The Caregiver's Recipe for Resilience. Nadine attended the University of New Orleans, where she studied business administration, and in 2013, she earned a professional certification in gerontology from the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs. She's also a certified senior advisor, freedom coach, and elite life coach, and she's the founder of the TSE Mastermind Group for Women Business Owners. In launching her inaugural book, Tears in My Gumbo, The Caregiver's Recipe for Resilience, Nadine has also launched a movement that she calls the Carosity Movement. It is her mission to spread the message of caring around the world. She invites individuals, organizations, churches, and businesses to join her on her most important endeavor. Please help me welcome Nadine Cornish. So thank you, panel, for joining us. Thank you, attendees, for joining us. As I said a moment ago, I'm going to start with some questions for each of the panelists in their area of expertise. And then I'm going to open it up to you guys in the audience if there's something you would like to ask either one of the panelists or all of us. So let's start with the legal issues, because that's often where you have to start. So, Mrs. Hammerle, what legal paperwork is essential for elders and their adult children or relatives to complete now before an emergency happens?
Well, I always tell people there's 7 basic documents that they need. The first one has to do with what happens with your stuff after you die, and that's the will. And the reason you want to get the will in place is so people remember you fondly after you die. Otherwise, it's a huge problem. So once we get the will out of place, now we're going to talk about documents that you need to help you live as you get older. The first one is the durable power of attorney. That's a financial power of attorney. Each state has their own type of little ancillary documents like this. Texas has a great one. They just passed a new statute about the durable power of attorney. It allows people to help you make financial decisions. The next one is the medical healthcare power of attorney. The medical power of attorney is important because if you can't make your own medical decisions, then you are designating an agent to make those medical decisions for you. So obviously it needs to be somebody you trust to make those kind of decisions for you. The next one is the directive to physicians. The directive to physicians is also known as a living will. So this is the one where you basically tell the doctors in the hospital, look, if I've been diagnosed with a terminal condition that's going to lead to my death in 6 months and I can't tell you what I want to do, then I'm telling you right now, I either do or do not want life-sustaining measures to be taken. That's like feeding tubes, artificial hydration, that type of thing. The second part of that is if you have an irreversible condition, think dementia, something like that, and you can't tell people what you want, then you're telling them in this document whether or not you want those life-sustaining procedures. That basically is to keep your family out of the courthouse. If your relatives start arguing about what they think your wishes are, if something like that comes up, then the directive to physician cleans that up. Next document is a HIPAA release. People who are close to you need to be able to get medical information to help you make decisions. So we put in place a HIPAA release to make that possible. The next document in Texas is a designation of guardian. You don't ever want to have a guardian, but if you do have a guardian, then you want to make sure that you've told the court who you want to serve as your guardian. That's probably not going to be, say, your mother-in-law. That may not be somebody you want to serve as your guardian. Probably not the husband you're divorcing right now. That's not a good person to serve as your guardian. So you can put down in lines, basically in rows, who it is that you want to serve as your guardian, and more importantly, you can tell the court who you do not want to serve as your guardian. Once you put that in play, then the court cannot appoint that person as a guardian. And the very last document is one that I think is a really fun one to put in place, and that's a designation of burial agent and burial instructions. Because nobody wants to go and find out 3 weeks after the funeral that you really wanted to be, say, cremated, or if you were cremated, you really wanted to be buried. So in this one, what you're doing is you're designating the agent to make those decisions for you, and you're giving the agent as many instructions as you can. If you can get your parents to put these documents in place, then you're going to have a lot less family turmoil, and you're going to make sure that your parents' wishes are followed.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think there are probably a lot of those elements in that process that are misunderstood. Tell us what things can be misunderstood about all those documents that we should be putting together.
Well, the biggest thing that gets misunderstood is that the documents really do have a legal effect. And if they're not updated on a regular basis, or if you hide them someplace safe and nobody can find them, or you lock them up in your safety deposit box where nobody can get to them, then they're going to probably have a kind of adverse effect on you. So if you're going to, when you put these documents in play, you need to kind of think through those aspects of it, make sure that you've told your agents where the documents can be found, and even more importantly, you need to make sure that you've spoken with your agents about what their responsibilities are going to be.
Absolutely. I always say, if you're going to put stuff in a safe deposit box, you at least ought to tell somebody where the key is. All right, so leaving the medical issues, and let's work our way into some of the legal issues. Let's work our way into some of the medical issues. And Dr. Studley, what is the best way to be involved in our elder medical decisions or care? As we get involved, and we want to maintain their independence, and we want them to feel like they're independent, but what's the best way for us to get involved in their medical care?
I think you bring up a really important point about respect, because all of us as children or as medical providers want to make sure that the person in front of us feels respected and autonomous, and that we give them as much power as we should to make decisions. And so I think always erring on the side of letting the patient, who's the parent, make the decision is extremely important. So, but we all know that if we live long enough, and many of us will live into ripe old age as we hope, but as that happens, unfortunately, things start to break down. That's the nature of aging. And we haven't found a pill to stop aging yet. So we need to be prepared that our parents are going to come to a point where they need you there to help them make these medical decisions. And getting to know ahead of time who their providers are, establishing a relationship with those providers is critical, because it allows you to have a dialogue with that provider on what you see happening that in a 30-minute visit in my office, I will never find out. No matter how intuitive I may be, no matter how many patients I treat with dementia, in that 30 minutes, I can't get a flavor for what you all see at home on a day-to-day basis. When you find out that they missed a payment on a bill, that actually they're not taking their blood pressure medicine, and that's why every time they come into your office it's high, that the reason that they haven't refilled their medicine on a timely basis is because they didn't take it, that the reason they're losing weight is because they actually can't get to the grocery store regularly anymore, they just forget to. And so that information is critical for a provider. And if you have a relationship with them, you can feed them that information while still respecting and giving autonomy to that family member that's so critical. So what I often say is send me a note ahead of time. Or if you're going to be at the office visit, drop off a note at the front desk. Make sure the front desk knows that I need to get a copy of that beforehand so I can read through it. So I understand what the issues are, but still during that face-to-face meeting with your family member, my attention's going to be on them. I may look to the side a few times, but my attention's going to be on them and making them the focal point of that visit, because it is critical.
This whole thing called eldercare is really about creating a team. It's about, and people talk about the stress and the the frustration and the feeling of being overwhelmed. And my experience in this is that you can really take that down a notch by really managing this entire project as a team. And you have somebody on the medical team, you have somebody on the legal team, you have somebody on the actual caregiving team if they're in an assisted living facility or a nursing care center. You have, Nadine's going to talk about some of the support that you get actually from your community. So it's really a team effort, and I thank you, Dr. Studley, for talking about that really ideal relationship that you can create with your elder's medical provider, and in fact the whole medical team. I mean, it's important to know the people at the front desk. It's important to have a copy of power of attorney at the doctor's office so that when they call you, they can talk to you. It's just so important to view this as a team, and to view this as something that is not going to happen every day. I mean, this is not going to go away. So, you're just going to, if you view it as a team project, you're going to really take the stress and the frustration down a notch. So, Nadine, Cornish, eldercare is on no one's list of life goals. Raise your hand if eldercare is part of your life goal. Don't see any hands. It arrives in our lap randomly and usually with an emergency. So how do caregivers keep their own stress levels manageable through the ups and downs of the journey?
So I'm going to say that when I was 7, my mom started the brainwashing process. You're going to take care of me. You're not going to put me into anybody's facility, nursing home, etc. So literally from the time that I was 7, I knew that if anything ever happened, I would fall into that role. And based on the type of family that you come from, cultural norms, etc. within that family, the person who's going to be the primary caregiver actually has a pretty good idea that it's going to be them, right? But even though from the age of 7, when I got the call that my mom had a pituitary brain tumor, I was absolutely not prepared. Fortunately, I had a background in public health, so I wasn't as intimidated as I might have been had I not had a public health background. But I wasn't ready. And I don't think anybody ever is. But the things that were in place were the fact that we had talked about what would happen when life happens. Having the conversation and communicating is 50% of the solution. You've already had the conversation. You're not guessing about what's needed, what's wanted, what's required. So that's a big part of it. So for those of you who are here, we're very appreciative of the fact that you're here. And hopefully you're not necessarily in the throes of caregiving right now, but you're anticipating it. And even if you are in the throes right now, you'll get to hear tonight some of the solutions and some of the things that you can do. But as far as self-care is concerned, which I am a serious proponent of, my book that was written, Tears in My Gumbo, The Caregiver's Recipe for Resilience, was written for the caregiver. And the reality is that we are all caregivers. Sooner or later, we are all caregivers. So if we start having the conversation with the people that we care about, the people that we might ultimately become caregivers for, half of the problems are solved because they've informed you. The legal paperwork is in place. You're starting to develop the relationships with their medical providers. And you're remembering that the most important calendar and the most important person on the calendar is you. Scheduling time for yourself is absolutely essential. In order for you to take care of someone else, you must be certified in self-care. You must make yourself a priority. That part's not negotiable. And putting yourself on your own calendar is a place to start.
It sounds like being stretched in so many directions is really solved in a big way by making yourself, being aware that you have to take care of yourself. Is there anything you would add in terms of not avoid that feeling of stretching and that feeling of just, oh my gosh, I can't do this another day?
Yes. Help, H-E-L-P, is a 4-letter word, but it's not a dirty word. Caregiving was not designed to be done solo. Caring in community is essential. That just like it's stressful for you to take on that whole project solo, it's stressful for the person who's receiving the care. As lovely as your face is and as wonderful as you are, they need to interact with somebody else. They need to hear somebody else's ideas, opinions, thoughts, etc. And so sharing the responsibility is absolutely essential. Recognizing that you should not do it by yourself, that you can't do it by yourself, and that getting help is a-okay. That's part of the process. Whether that's family members, whether that's using the people within your community, your neighborhood, your church, former co-workers, old friends, etc. People appreciate being asked. They really do. But you know what we do with our family is we anticipate that they ought to know. But they weren't the chosen ones, right? They weren't the ones brainwashed at 7, right? And it really is. It's an honor to serve as a caregiver, but it's also an honor to share that responsibility with other people in your life. So asking for help is essential.
Asking for help is something that you've got to do on this next question, which I'm going to share with you, in terms of what do I often hear people asking, what do I do when I got to take the car keys away? What do I do when I have to remove the checkbook or take charge of the bills? They don't want you to. They feel I have a reader whose dad was a banker, and he said, "Oh my gosh, you're not going to take this over from me. I'm a banker. I know exactly what I'm doing." But he had Alzheimer's, and it was coming on, and she really needed to find a way to start being involved. And finally, to the point where she just had to take it away. And that question comes up so often, and the help that we need to get in that situation is a person of authority. And the person of authority is going to depend on your family, on your elder. That person of authority may be a minister. It may be their doctor. It could be their attorney. It could be a good friend, their best friend forever, says, "Sweetheart, it's that time. You got to let go of it." And that is really the way you do it, is you use someone in authority to help them understand in a removed way that this is what they need to do. It's time, and it's hard. And it's really important to acknowledge to them that it's hard. If they still understand that it's hard, they need that empathy and that compassion, that it is hard. But if you take that job on yourself, you're going to get often the butt of the frustration and the anger and you're taking this away from me. I gave you life. You know that whole "I gave you life and I can take it away"? I gave you life and you're taking my car keys away? Come on. But if you use that person of authority, you often can remove yourself from that confrontation in a very effective way. So let's open it up to the audience a little bit and ask, do you have any questions for us? Is there something that you came here tonight to just say, I have got to get this out of my mind and into somebody else's pile? Yes.
Hi. My thing is, my mom is 83, has strokes, cancer, but sharp mind, but you can see it going. I don't know how to recognize when she can no longer live alone. And in my mind, I want to put that off as long as I can, but I don't want to be derelict, you know, because we tried living together before and it was really tough. But she is my mama, so. But I don't know how to judge when it's a good time that she can't live alone anymore.
Well, let's get Dr. Studley's thought on that.
So living independently, most of the time when physicians talk about this, we talk about instrumental activities of daily living and basic activities of daily living. Instrumental activities of daily living being I can cook my own meal, I can make sure I have enough food in the refrigerator to take care of myself for the next week. I can manage my own finances, I can set up my own pillbox and be in charge of that. If an emergency happens in my house, I know how to access emergency care. That's, if we can do all those things, then independent living on our own with no help is appropriate. If you're starting to need help with those instrumental activities of daily living, then really living 24/7 on your own, you're gonna start getting into some safety issues there, okay? So when we're talking about being dependent in instrumental activities of daily living, that's when you're really talking about assisted living level care or assistance at home. It can be done at home or in an assisted living facility. When somebody's completely dependent in all their basic activities of daily living, they can't bathe themselves, can't feed themselves, can't transfer themselves, that's when you're talking about the next level up, so nursing home level care. But really, it's those, when we talk about it as physicians, we talk about those instrumental activities of daily living.
One thing I have found in evaluating that is they are often, better late than never. I find in elder care, it's better never than late. And what that means to me is move them when they can have a sense of community and build a community around themselves. Oftentimes people wait until that fall or that something that says they can't live alone, they can't do these activities of daily living. But if you move them while they can still build a community, while they can still have lunch with somebody that they really like, or look forward every Tuesday to that really fun bingo game, or that outing at the Arboretum with their best friend Joe. Those kind of things, if they can build a community while they are still able to build the community, then they're in a place where they feel comfortable. If you move them after they can no longer build a community, they're just waiting. And that feels very sad to me. And it also feels very sad, I think, to the people that you move. And so if my mother did this, and my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, we moved them when they could still have a community. And they loved the activities. They fought every bit of the way. Oh no, I don't need to go. But the activities are fun, and they have people of their own generation that they can share memories with. That's huge, is being able to share memories, common memories. My mom died at 98, and she almost had no one left to share memories with. I told her, don't make any friends over 50. You can't. But it really, my mother-in-law now is in a place where she can have activities. She doesn't have to cook. We had someone come in and cook for her and leave some food for later on, but she was a social eater. She didn't want to eat by herself. And so activities and food and just having that somebody know that you're okay, that we saw her at breakfast. It's a big deal. So I would just encourage you to not feel like you had to wait until that ragged edge of technical.
Not crisis.
Yeah, technical, not crisis. So,
Yeah. What I've found is a lot of people are very, very, very good at masking as they get older. And it takes sometimes it takes a dedicated effort to get through that mask. And sometimes they can mask for, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you don't know until you maybe go into their home and you realize the hoarding that's going on, or you realize how things have deteriorated, and they don't see it, because of their situation. What I have recommended to people before is that they maybe seek like a geriatric care manager, which is somebody with some expertise. Usually they have a nursing background and a social work background, to come in and actually consult with the person, because they've got the expertise to see through it. I've also recommended that when kids come to me with this issue, that they bring their parent in, because I have talked to a lot of people who are beginning with dementia. And from my standpoint, sometimes I'm able to see something or perceive something once I get past the 5th question where they've kind of glossed over, and I'm asking their great-grandchild's name, and they're, oh, that one, and they smile at the other person, so they supply it. And that can help. So we need to talk.
Would you like to add anything?
As you asked the question, I thought about the one client that I had who absolutely did not want to leave their home under any circumstances. And it was a couple. They had been living in their homes for 30 years, and their adult children all lived outside of the state of Colorado. And so I was literally hired to serve as the care manager for that family. But they are the one and only family that I've had in almost 9 years now who had the means and resources to cover the cost of 24/7 care for 2 individuals. And at the height of their care, they were paying $27,000 a month. A month for 24/7 care. They needed around-the-clock care, and they hired an agency before I came on board, and that agency, it cost a lot for 24/7 care. So unless you have the financial means to counter, and for individuals who are adamant, and most are adamant about not wanting to leave their home, it's like, okay, what's the plan? What are we gonna do? What can we realistically do? And again, back to that conversation that you have before you have to have the conversation. What's realistic based on the circumstances? What can we financially afford? What can you financially afford? And these are our options.
Thank you. Did that help?
Yeah. Wake up.
Yes, you have a question?
Are you and me?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yes, it feels a little complex. I'm going to try and lay it out as easily as I can. So I've been a caregiver for my mother, and that was a whole different story. But now it's my ex, who's older than I am. So he's 78 now, and had children from another marriage, and then my son. But he seems to have moved into some form of dementia. And this was just, we really weren't in contact with him, and then all of a sudden, so maybe in October, we heard he was being evicted basically for not paying rent, and we went to go help him move, and we realized what bad shape he was in, as he hasn't been eating much, he couldn't really pack and all of that. So first we moved him into my house, but we don't really have another room, and he wants to live in someone's house. That's what he likes, to have a room in someone's house. And we found that for him. And he gets pretty good Social Security, $2,000 a month, so it should be okay. But here's the clinker. He's gotten drawn in by some scammers. Not just one group. He's apparently prime material. And he's been working with these people from Nigeria for 3 years now. We kind of had to become secret spies, and he's given at least $100,000 to them. He owes one of his children $44,000 and another son. So nobody in his first family speaks to him. His friends are mostly done with him, and we're it. And so we're trying our best, but he's so resourceful at the same time having dementia, and that the minute that Social Security check comes in, he finds a way around us, and it's gone like that. You know, he sends it Western Union. So my son now has power of attorney, we did get that, but he still has the right to revoke his power at any moment, apparently, as we can't, like he can't get into the bank account to actually control it. And now our new problem is the banks actually closed his accounts because he owes so much money. So the Social Security check is mailed straight to him. So we really don't know how to intervene anymore to help him, and are facing this next month, unless some other miracle occurs. The miracles he has is that he gets, the scammers will send him checks, he cashes it, and then they bounce. And so he seems to have money because he cashed the check, but really he's building a huge debt and banks are suing him. And so I don't want my son to be liable for all of this financial mess he's creating. And we actually told him, I said, you know, if you keep this up, you are now going to be ending up in a homeless shelter because we don't have the money to pay for things. And he's fighting us so much, he won't even get Medicare. So he fell, hurt his hip. We can't get him any care because they sent us away, as he has to do back pay apparently, because he didn't activate his Medicare. You guys probably get it more than me. I was shocked, like what? And so since he won't put money there, we've taken him several times to a doctor and we can't get help unless we'd have to like throw him in the car and drag him to the hospital. And we would if we thought that maybe they'd help us get a diagnosis of dementia or even find out how badly he's hurt. He's on a walker now. So we really are lost with this one. But there you go. That's pretty much the story.
Bless your heart, girl. Bless your
It
heart.
actually is a little
Yeah,
worse.
bless your heart.
You know how
Bless your heart.
it's actually worse because he's trying to heal himself through fasting. And so he's down to like 100-some pounds.
Oh my God.
And so it's also scary in terms of he probably has a lot of health issues. I don't know.
But can't you do, like in Child Protection Services, if a mom or something, we can do like a 1043 or whatever it is to have a person that's mentally ill committed?
It would be his, I guess the
I
thing
think that's legal.
I'm making up stuff.
All right, so first, I'm very sorry, and I'm very sorry that you all are going through this, okay? There's nothing pleasant about any of that. So there is Adult Protective Services, which is the adult side of CPS. You can call them because what he is guilty of at this point is self-neglect.
we did call.
And Adult Protective Services will sometimes, am I being recorded? That's a good idea to call, okay? You have a duty to call. Sometimes it doesn't work. Depending on what county he is in, if there is a county with a probate court and there are designated probate courts in Tarrant County, Dallas County, Collin County, and Denton County in this little 4-county area, then Adult Protective Services will sometimes take a back seat and they will let the court investigators be the ones to initiate. So in every probate court, they have what is called a letter of inquiry, basically, where you have asked the probate court. You can get online, you can fill it out, you can send it to the probate court, and you can ask them to open an investigation. And the probate judges in Dallas County, we have 3, and in Tarrant County we have 2, Denton and Collin, we have 1 each. They will assign a court investigator to determine whether or not a guardianship is appropriate. In this case, it sounds like a guardianship is appropriate. They're right now a little harder to get than they used to be, but that would be, if you've tried Adult Protective Services, that would be the next step to go, because it's really a situation where he's endangering himself personally, and certainly he's unable to take care of his estate. Okay, so that's the next step. If we had time and if he was at all inclined to do so, we might be able, and he was competent, we might be able to get him to sign off on something like a trust and put money in a trust. We might get a rep payee. I mean, there's other little steps that we could try to take, but some of those are not going to be available if he is indeed incapacitated. And I'm sure that there's other suggestions.
For us, usually the first thing we say is to call Adult Protective Services, which you've done, and you're right. It doesn't always go as we hoped it would. But then the next is to find a good elder law attorney to help you through this quagmire that you're in.
So
Because
if you're referring to someone who's still at home or someone who is living in assisted living or independent living facility, it's a little different in that if the person that you're talking about is actually already in a residence of some sort besides living at home, you can build a relationship with the people at the facility. That's what I believe is really important in terms of when we talked about the team, is really building a team and understanding, and it requires time investment. And a lot of times people just want to come in from out of town, sit down, have a cup of coffee with their elder, and is everything okay? Do you need any more Pond's cold cream, or are we're good? You need any paper towels? Okay, well, see ya, you know? But really that's not being a good advocate for them. And what is most important when you've got somebody out of your immediate state or town is really learning to be an advocate on their behalf. That's really what they need. And it's so important to learn what their situation is. So are they participating? Go to if they are in assisted living or in a residence, find out from the director of activities, are they participating? Maybe tell the person, no, my mom really loves art. Do you have any art classes that she could attend? Or my mother loved to garden before she moved here. Is there something that she can participate in? Or, you know, my dad was an attorney. Is there something that you can help keep him involved? So you go to the different areas, maybe to the kitchen, if there's something in particular that, for example, with my mom hated Jell-O, absolutely hated Jell-O. And every meal Jell-O would show up. And she didn't like ice in her water. That was another thing that showed up every meal, ice in her water. So I went to the kitchen and I made friends with the people in the kitchen and the people that served her. And I just said, please, no Jell-O. Please, no ice in her water. And about 40 times after I would go and I would see more Jell-O, I made a sign and it said, Ruth Asaff, no Jell-O, no ice in the water. And I stuck it on the wall in the kitchen. And every time I would go down, I would bring something really nice for the people in the kitchen. I would bring them a big plate of donuts or a big fruit bowl or something. And I would say, thank you so much for making sure that my mother has no Jell-O and no ice in her water. And pretty soon, I would come in town and she would have no Jell-O and, you know, generally no ice in her water. But it's really understanding and advocating on her behalf or on his behalf, on the elder's behalf. I came to know the medical care team. And if I did come in town, I would generally try to make sure that I either went to a doctor's appointment with my mother or I introduced myself, as Dr. Studley said, to the care team. And they knew I would send them a fax in advance and say, Mom's coming on Tuesday. Would you please make sure you call me after her appointment and bring me up to speed, because unfortunately I can't be there. And if you're a member of the care team and they know that you're a member of the care team because they have a copy of your power of attorney, so they know they can talk to you, then you are all of a sudden a part of the care and you're effectively there. So it's really finding ways to put yourself into the care and into the team. And if they live at home, it's sort of the same thing. When you're there, introduce yourself to their neighbors. One of my readers wrote to me and said, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that my mom lives in Vermont and I live in Alabama and I don't even know her neighbors. They don't know me. Walk around with her neighbors and give them your phone number, give them your contact information. Say, if you ever see mom out and she's confused, call me. Or if you don't see her for a week or so and she comes out every day to check the mail and you haven't seen her for a week or so, call me. It's really building an understanding of their life and advocating on their behalf, even in advance of an emergency, and especially in advance of the emergency. Make sure everybody knows that you're the one to call should something happen. And make sure that everybody that cares for your elder, whether it's the person that does the lawn service if they still live at home, or the person that takes care of them and takes them to the doctor, make sure everybody knows that you're watching, that you care, and that you're involved, that you're the leader of the team. And you're glad they're on the team, but that you are a leader of the team. So,
On the financial side, which I'm always concerned about, if they will make you a signer on their account, not give you co-ownership, you do not want co-ownership of their account, but you want to be a signer on their account, then you'll be able to log in and take a look and find out if bills are getting paid, and you'll actually be able to pay their bills. So that's one thing. Second thing is, if they will give you passwords and logins, then you can find out what they've actually been doing online, what they're ordering and doing, things like that. They may be a little more reluctant to do that. That's usually a last step kind of thing, but that's very, very helpful if you've got that. If you've got a durable power of attorney as an agent, then in case there was something out there they didn't put you as a signer on, you can use that to get access to their financial information. And finally, and this is kind of as a last resort, I don't like to sell people trusts, but sometimes if that's the easiest way to handle assets and to manage things. So if they're willing to set up a trust, it can be revocable, but if they're willing to set up a trust and transfer almost everything into the trust, then you as trustee will be able to handle things and you won't have to go through the back door to look at the accounts and everything else, because they're going to basically be in your name. So that's on the other side. And regarding the medical side, if you have a general HIPAA release, that's a global HIPAA release, then you don't have to wait and rely on them when they go to the doctor to put your name down on every single doctor and every single care provider that they go see, because they're always going to see new doctors and new care providers. You've just got that in play.
I think that HIPAA part is critical because we cannot talk to anybody without it. The laws have become extremely strict with that. So I think the global HIPAA release is an excellent tool.
wonderful.
I have one.
Yeah.
So, for our situation, all the documents, taking care of all of that, because you see this kind of dementia creeping up that, thought for a while. And then she's very polished, she's very intelligent, so for a lot of people, they would have absolutely no idea. She walked into the room today, she'd have a very lovely conversation with anybody here, and you would have absolutely no idea. So, getting through we did all the documents. She's right at that, what we call it, the instrumental activities, where she doesn't take her pills and she doesn't do a lot of these things. So she lives in California. I'm very I would really love to know what your thoughts are on taking somebody out of an area that she loves. She loves her house. She's kind of putting herself in a situation where she's spending more. Even though I have control over her bank account, I'm just basically monitoring things. Telling her about a budget is just beyond her comprehension. She doesn't understand the words. So I guess, do you think is it better to have somebody in their area where they feel comfortable, or is it better for us to kind of consider we're trying to get her to come here lived here for 6 years. She has never visited, so I get the feeling like she's a little bit hostile to the idea of actually coming to visit Dallas, because maybe she feels we're gonna kidnap her or something. I don't know what the thoughts are on that, but it's just, what are your thoughts on moving somebody from one place where they're quite comfortable to a place where they have no community and have to kind of start over?
Well, I would say that moving them needs to be a conversation that you actually sit down and have with them. And involving them, excuse me, perhaps bringing her here, touring some places, if you knew of some places that you would like to take her to, visiting them in advance, then bringing her here, you know, Mom, I can't wait for you to see this. This is an awesome place. You love movies, and this is only about half a mile from the movie theater, and they take you down to the movies every Friday, something like that, where you're really building up. You understand her, and you understand what is important to her in life, what drives her internal spark, and then visiting with her and having that conversation that Mrs. Cornish was talking about in terms of this is a plan. This is something that we're going to build together. Mom, if you build this together with us, then we're building something that we are all invested in. You have a say-so now. Let's have it when you can still have a voice in this. You're building your own community with your own ideas and your own preferences. And do that now. I have mixed emotions about moving because I've seen it work really well and I've seen it work not so well. But it always works better when you have a team approach to it with the elder and say, let's do this together. It's very challenging, I would say, from personal experience, to not move them and not have anybody really that you trust in close to them. Because it's very hard. Somebody can slip in and do something that is very toxic to them in a short time period. So I'd love to see what the other panelists have to say about this, but in my personal opinion, it's really about building a plan with them and making sure that this is something that she can buy into and be excited about.
So what happens when you can't get them to buy into it? What happens when cooperation is just not happening? There comes a time, and especially when it comes to adult children having to make decisions on behalf of their parents, the decision has to be made just as your parents made the decisions for you when you were dependent upon them. Remembering that there has been a shift in the relationship. You are not parenting your parents, but you are taking responsibility for their well-being. And sometimes you have to make the tough call and make the decision that a move has to happen because the move is in their best interest. And when you're long distance, sometimes it's really even more challenging because how often can you go back to monitor and see what's happening? When it becomes necessary and you find yourself, I did the long distance thing as well, and I made the really tough decision of moving my mom after she suffered a stroke. Most of my family and my siblings were in California, but they had given up and they weren't providing the support that was needed. I was committed to making sure that she received the best possible care, so that meant she would have to leave California and move to Colorado, away from everybody. The only people that she knew was myself and my husband. That was it. But in the 4 years, mind you, when we moved her, they said she probably had 3 weeks to live. And in the 4 years that she lived with us, we created the community. We created the community in our home and brought in people to help support that. I mean, she lived a tremendous quality of life, but everything based on the list that we checked. You got to create that list, right? What are the pros? What are the cons? What's in her best interest? What's in our best interest as a family taking care of her? That move had to happen, and she lived a great quality of life as a result of that happening.
I think too that oftentimes we want to protect our parent from the reality of what's happening with them. And what I find is it's best to lay the cards on the table. Be upfront with what you see, be upfront with what you see their needs are. Bring their medical provider into that conversation to say, this is dementia. This is what happens with dementia, and we have some really hard decisions to make together, but they're inevitable and we have to make them. And it's not going to be easy. Those are some of the hardest conversations I have in a day, but they're totally necessary to move that dial forward. And if she does have true Alzheimer's disease, then she may not remember that conversation, but you've got to be upfront with it with a medical provider present, and that will really help you move things along. But it's not easy. So, you know, buy-in almost never happens up front.
Oh, no. I had the doctor, or main doctor, had a conversation with her, but I almost feel like it was almost too gentle.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like,
and
it was very,
as medical providers, we're often trained to look on the bright side. Yes, and it doesn't usually provide patients and families with the level of conviction that they need to move forward. So you may want to look for, getting a geriatric case manager can be tremendously helpful in your situation to help even push the medical provider with some stronger tones during those conversations.
It's also nice if it's at all possible to make this happen before there's a huge crisis. Because crisis is not a good time to try and make that happen. And on the other side, Texas doesn't adhere to the interstate compact on guardianships. So once they're here in Texas, for all purposes, Texas courts can assume jurisdiction over them. I'm just throwing that out. Nobody wants to make that happen. But I just had a hearing where there was a judge in Missouri who was saying, this guy was here 3 months earlier, and we were saying, yeah, but he's not here now. My judge said, tough, he's here, so, yeah.
Thank you for these questions. We have about time for maybe one more question. Does anybody have one more question? Yes.
Yes, so my grandfather fell ill. He had his will in place for about a year. Prior to a crisis situation, he wanted to change his will possibly. We're not too sure of that. He had another family member who was a full-time caregiver because we weren't around, and it was stated that he wanted to change his will, and he told that person exactly what he wanted. So my case is just what takes legal precedence. We want to respect this caregiver because they were there, we weren't. While at the same time, the will is established, so what takes precedence?
Wait, I
this-
get this question.
Yeah.
That's not my question. Okay, so to have a legal will in Texas, since 2009, it has to be in writing. So if he told somebody, I want this to happen, doesn't matter. That is not a legal will. It's not going to toss the other will, okay? In order to be a legal written will, it has to be signed by him, and there have to be 2 witnesses. There's other things we can do to make it easier to prove up, but that's the big thing. Or whatever he can write it completely, totally 100% in his handwriting. I'm talking not putting a date stamp on it, nothing like that. 100% in his handwriting and sign it, and then that would be considered a legal will. But just having a caregiver saying, oh, by the way, he meant me to have his Cadillac and his house and the diamond ring and all that stuff, sorry, not getting there.
Does that answer your question?
Very good.
Oh, a clear-cut question. Think about.
This is a real clear-cut question. When you're talking about geriatric caseworker, is that a social worker, geriatric caseworker, a special, where do you find one at? There, obviously.
So a geriatric care manager is
Okay.
specifically trained, and oftentimes it is a social worker specifically trained in elder care. So everything that's got anything to do with geriatric care, your care manager can handle. They're typically very on top of all of the resources. They know the best long-term care facilities. They typically know who the best elder care attorneys are, who the best physicians are providing geriatric care, gerontologists. They really have a good handle on those resources. In terms of where you can find them, because I don't live in Texas, I would say you can contact Area on Aging. Every city has an Area on Aging division that can provide you with a list of resources, and your geriatric care manager would definitely be listed. There's also a National Association of Geriatric Care Managers. You can go onto their website, and all of those who are board certified will be listed.
Okay.
In Dallas, it's they're called the Senior Source, and they will do some work. How do I say this? Pro bono, or they have geriatric care managers that will work with you, even if you can't, because it is a paid service and it can be quite costly. But for those who qualify, the Senior Source has some resources available. So I would check with them.
Thank you. We had a snag with the Senior Source in that if he won't come with us, they wouldn't work with me.
Oh, they used to do house calls, but that may have gone by the wayside.
Well, I was about to put a plug in for the Senior Source, but
I love them. I think they're great, but they were kind. They just said sorry.
they do also have some wonderful support for caregivers and for those responsible for care. So if you have a question or an issue, you can actually go in and talk to them or call and ask for help. They have things running the gamut from volunteer for seniors to help for family support. So they really do have a lot of things available. So there were a lot of questions. You guys asked so many questions, wonderful questions. Thank you so much. There are probably thousands more waiting back not in the cerebral cortex. They're back here flying around. And so many of these questions are addressed in my book, which is How to Take Care of Old People Without Losing Your Marbles. 18 chapters. Really quick read. You can return to it over and over again depending on what you're going through at the moment. Nadine's book is Tears in My Gumbo. Really, really full of information and support for caregivers and those walking the journey of elder care. It's about support for yourself and those that are caring for elders. We all know somebody besides ourselves that are walking this path. We know friends, we know siblings, we know cousins, we know all kinds of people, neighbors, that need this information. Mrs. Hammerle also has some information on her law practice, and I would suggest if law is something that you're wondering about, some of the legal issues, that you see Mrs. Hammerle and get a brochure about some of the things that she does. She does all kinds of things, and I would just suggest that you get a brochure and talk to her after the fact, after our panel is over. And as far as Dr. Studley goes, she is a doctor in the medical center at Highland Springs, which is, I guess, technically in Dallas, but on the edge of Plano and Richardson. And it is a care community where you start out in independent living. This may be something that your mom is interested in. Start out as independent living, and as the need for care increases, they have availability for memory care and for assisted living, and then nursing care out farther in the care spectrum. And the medical center is available for residents of Highland Springs, which is awesome. Dr. Studley was my mother's doctor, and it was a wonderful experience to be able to know that somebody could come in and help with her care that was consistent and I could rely on and I could talk to. So just want to point out that that's a wonderful option for those of you looking for a place where your parent might enjoy being, and for all of those gnarly legal issues that none of us can understand. Mrs. Hammerle is the one that unravels that big knot. So thank you so much for coming. We will all be around for questions, further consultation or questions that you might have. And thanks so much to Javier and the Wild Detectives Bookstore for hosting this amazing panel.